Welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and in this episode, we'll be looking at Nicholas Genest, as well as a surprise Solid Rock member. I'm not sure if Nick actually pronounces his last name Genest, or pronounces it the French way, Genet. Since I don't know, I'm going to pronounce it like Forrest Gump would pronounce the French version, Genet. For those of you who don't know who Nick is, he's the member of Solid Rock Church that likes to barbecue his nether regions on the sidewalk while holding hands with Trisha Ross. Doesn't that just sound like the most romantic date a person could have? Nicholas was born in 1978 to Audrey and Richard Genet and grew up in Woodbridge, Virginia. Woodbridge is bordered by the Occoquan and Potomac rivers. It has a population of around 44,000 and is home to beautiful historic sites such as McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts. They even have an Aldi. By the time Nicky was 10, he was already making the news, or at least getting his name in the paper. He entered a letter writing competition for Mother's Day, and his letter was published in the local newspaper. He wrote, "My mother is the best mom because she goes shopping and buys me lots of candy. Her name is Audrey. She always buys me pizza at the sports center. She really cares about me. She always tells me she loves me. I love her too." Aww. Nick didn't win the competition, but it's nice to know that he was sweet at some point in his life. I'll bet he can still be bought with pizza and lots of candy too. Nicholas the Ridiculous attended Woodbridge High School, where he played trumpet in the marching band. Well, toot my horn and call me jazz hands. Nicholas graduated in 1996 and was, at the very least, in the top 95% of his class. After high school, Nick felt the high seas calling his name. Sadly, being a pirate was out of the picture because he was born tragically lacking any savvy. So he joined the Navy instead. Nick was stationed in Jacksonville, Florida in the early 2000s, and boy oh boy did he use this time to get into trouble, that little scamp. If he wasn't hanging out at the Navy base or on some ship, he was probably either in the back of a police cruiser or in jail. Along with having a handful of traffic violations, Nicky collected the following charges during just a few short years in Florida: providing alcohol to a minor, writing a worthless check, resisting arrest, 2 misdemeanor battery charges that were dropped because the witnesses didn't show up to court, which doesn't seem suspicious at all, leaving the scene of an accident, and he was charged with arson. The arson charges were dropped for unknown reasons. Maybe the prosecutor just didn't have enough evidence to convict him, or maybe he was released on a sailor special. A sailor special is something I think I just made up. I wouldn't recommend Googling it, though, because there's no telling what it might be if it's actually a thing. Nicky also seems to have fathered a child while he was on the good ship Lollipop. Well, congratulations, 20 or so years late. In 2009, Nick was hit with over $11,000 in back child support payments. That same year, he married Nora, who isn't the mother of that child and whose name isn't really Nora. But she's been through enough just being married to Nick, so she doesn't need to be exposed. Nick moved back to Virginia after he'd had enough of boats and nabbed another 13 traffic violations and 2 public intox charges. I will say that over time he's either improved his driving or he's gotten a better radar detector because he has 0 traffic violations in South Carolina. Well, you go, Nicky. Nick and Nora moved to Myrtle Beach in 2019 and were divorced by 2022. I'm not sure when Nick started attending Solid Rock Church, but I think he's found a kindred spirit in John Paul Miller. When that boy wonder Russell Long, the genius attorney, attempted to serve the entire internet with a cease and desist letter, Nick either took it upon himself or was tasked with the assignment of sharing it on as many social media posts and comments as he could. He's a regular little worker bee. Recently, someone posted a pic on TikTok of Nick and John Paul Miller standing in front of Solid Rock, and it looks like Nick might have been taking photos with his phone. I'm guessing he was pointing it at the protesters. Someone in the comment on the post has an account named Justice for JP and goes by the name Loki. He wrote that there won't be any more protests after this man, meaning Nick, is done with his documentation, and that the protesters will need to bring bail money with them next week. Oh no! I don't know if Loki is JP or Nick or just some random internet dude who wants attention. In any case, I'm not convinced that Nick is any kind of Sherlock Holmes. And I love how vague that thread is. What is he documenting? Their outfits? Hairstyles? Height? Their choice of fonts on their signs? According to Nick's LinkedIn account, he's a Keller Williams real estate agent. In his bio, he included his Navy career, but left out all the side gigs he did while he was in Florida, like resisting arrest. Why'd you leave out the fun bits, Nick? He also wrote that he offers free car repairs to the less fortunate, and is a resource for anything to do with cars. I wonder if he knows anything about tires, specifically how to deflate them. No, probably not. In early May, a woman gave an interview on a YouTube Live. She was the wife of a member at Solid Rock Church, and in the interview she mentioned her husband's name was Nick. A lot of people have been convinced that it was Nick Genest, but when I looked at it, the puzzle pieces didn't fit. Nick hadn't got remarried since his 2022 divorce. He was dating a woman that attended Solid Rock with him, but they broke up this past spring. Now, how do I know that they broke up? Because she started posting things like this on Facebook. She also posted a video on the 4 types of narcissist. And then Nick posted this. So God closes doors sometimes, right? Then we realize that person is not in God's will for us. And then we decide to be active in keeping that door closed. And maintaining that position is probably one of the hardest. If Nick decides to try dating again, he should just start his profile with, I use probably instead of probably. I think that would be quite the screening tool. And the question is, does he use it because he thinks it's just super adorable, or because he thinks probably is the actual word? So who was the husband mentioned in the live stream if it wasn't Nicholas Genest? Well, there is, or was, another Nick at Solid Rock Church. I'm not going to give any other identifying information because I don't want to put his wife in any danger. We'll call her Ashley and call him Nick too. Let me clarify that in the live stream, Ashley didn't seem worried at all about identifying herself. She even had her screen name up on the live. I'm refraining from sharing any more identifiers out of an abundance of caution. Her husband has deleted all of his social media accounts. It's almost like he doesn't want to be known. At the time of the interview, Ashley was in hiding from her husband. Ashley attended Solid Rock Church with her husband Nick too, but never became a member. He did. She alleged that while she attended Solid Rock, Nick too was being told that she wasn't subservient enough. Well, we can't have any assertive women, can we? That just wouldn't do. Bernie Kennerson was the night pastor at the church at the time, and was one of the main church leaders who told Nick too that he needed to rein in that little wife of his. Bernie is also a musician who plays the electronic wind instrument. I didn't know what that was, and I looked it up. I discovered that in the wrong hands, it can be used as a method of torture. When Bernie starts playing that sweet wind instrument, he goes from being Bernie to Burnzilla. That's actually what he calls himself. Bernie is also the lowlife who is on the sex offenders registry for indecent acts with his 6-year-old daughter. I suppose for men like Bernie, it's easier to get by with disgusting acts if your wife is submissive. The leaders of the church, along with her husband, decided that Ashley was just too entirely uncontrollable and needed to be exercised. And I don't mean on a treadmill or taken out to a corral and made to run laps until she passes out. I'm talking holy water, crucifix, and projectile pea soup vomit exercise. But Ashley didn't acquiesce, and that did not make the church leaders happy. You know, it must be difficult to go through life with an ego so fragile that you cannot abide a woman telling you no. When Ashley said no thank you to the exorcism, Nick, too, along with church leaders, allegedly attempted to have her fired from her job. Ashley said that people from the church were calling her workplace administration and saying that she was having an affair with her boss. Well, the joke's on them, because it turns out that Ashley never even sees her boss. She works by herself. So when trying to get her fired didn't work, Nick, too, and his mother tried to get Ashley diagnosed with schizophrenia and have her committed. Well, that sounds entirely familiar, doesn't it? When Ashley would refuse to go to church, Nick, too, would threaten divorce or would tell her that he'd lock her out of the house and she would be homeless. He sounds absolutely dreamy, doesn't he? Ashley said that when Mica left John Paul last year, he paid church members to talk her into going back to him. She also said that John Paul was continually belittling Mica during his sermons, and he preached a sermon where he told the congregation that if Mica reached out to them to not talk to her because it wasn't good for her mental health. He also had the congregation pray that Mica would hit rock bottom so she'd come back to church. I think John Paul didn't want anyone talking to Mica because then they'd see that she wasn't having the psychotic break he said she was. Ashley was kicked out of her house when she told Nick, too, that what was happening at the church was wrong. She finally had enough of his abuse and left him. Ashley ended the live stream by saying that the night Mica died, she received a message from one of the church elders that read, "Satan is present. Please be careful and take care of yourself." In the 1800s and even into the 1900s, it was normal practice for men to have their wives thrown into insane asylums when the wives were being assertive or unruly or just being. Husbands had the right to have their wives committed on a whim. In 1860, Elizabeth Packard was married to Pastor Theophilus Packard, and I think we can all agree she did not marry him for his swarthy good looks. Theo had Elizabeth committed to an asylum because she disagreed with his religious beliefs. Theo also did not think it was copacetic that Elizabeth was against slavery, so he seems like a super great guy. Elizabeth spent 3 years at Jacksonville Insane Asylum before being released, mostly at the insistence of her children. When she returned home, Theo, who was probably another man who considered himself to be the best husband in the world, locked Elizabeth in the nursery of their home and nailed the windows shut. She was able to slip a letter to a friend, which led to her being able to have a hearing to determine if she was insane or not. The jury only took 7 minutes to declare her sane. Elizabeth went on to become an advocate for married women's rights and founded the Anti-Insane Asylum Society. Women who were committed to asylums didn't just get to sit around and make macaroni art. They were subjected to horrible treatments and inhumane procedures, all because men wanted to control them. It seems as though the male leaders at Solid Rock Church want to take women back to the 1900s and to be able to lock us up for whatever reason men choose. Do you think they have a handbook that outlines exactly how to have your wife committed for schizophrenia? I think what irritates John Paul about the protests so much is that the majority of protesters are women. I don't think he cares for women who assert themselves or don't obey him or cater to his every whiny whim. I think he prefers women who don't like to make waves, women who will keep the peace, women who will stay in line. So to those women who were protesting, keep letting your voices be heard. Keep making waves. Keep stepping out of line. In 1976, Harvard University historian Laurel Thatcher Ulrich coined the phrase, "Well-behaved women seldom make history." Mica was once well-behaved until she'd had enough. She was starting to find her voice and her spirit and was breaking free from John Paul Miller's dominance. When Mica's law is finally enacted, she will have made history. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment as this helps my channel to grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.